Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. I'm Kris. This video is sponsored by Mohamed. This is the Century, America's Time, 1914-1919 shell shock. They're about to get into the battle of, oh my goodness. I was here. I ended the video like 2 minutes ago. Oh my goodness. Am I okay? It was the big battle. The Somme. Is that what it was? I got thinking about iced tea and popcorn. I completely forgot. Okay, before we get started, you click that. You click that, helps me out. There's a thanks button here. You can click on that, donate to the channel, request a video. Your name sponsors the video. All right, let's get into it.
An artillery barrage that would last intense bombardments in the history of warfare. An artillery barrage that would last an entire week. The Battle of the Somme was about to begin.
There must be 1,000 guns if there was one. It was a terrible roar from morning till night. But the foolish officers said, "Tomorrow, boys, you'll be over the top, and don't worry," he says. "There'll be no trenches there. Our shells have blown to pieces. There'll be no Germans there. They're blown to pieces. All you have to do is to walk over and take those trenches. In fact," he says, "you can carry your rifle like a bag."
The Germans, after the shelling, they simply come out of the dugouts, grabbed their machine guns, and then waited for the Tommies.
I hope the officer that said that was beaten to death with something like a lock in a sock or some soap in a sock or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, you just told us just so casually, just go out and it will be fine. Like, don't you worry about it. There was something to worry about.
They just simply swathed them down, so you're cutting down grain. They didn't get 200 feet from the trench. One German machine gunner said, "I stopped firing because I was sickened by what we were doing."
It was the bloodiest day in British history. 20,000 men killed, 40,000 wounded. And yet, the day after, and for days after that, young men continued to be ordered out of their trenches and into near certain death. The poet-volunteer Alan Seeger was killed on July the 4th. On the same morning, Ted Francis waited for the signal to go.
Officers are down below us in the trenches with a whistle, and when they blow that whistle, we got to dash out of the trenches and make for this German trench. And it is in those few 4 or 5 minutes that we look at each other and say, "Oh, well, now I shall do this." Some were visibly shaking, some were crying. And of course, when the whistle went and we had to scramble over,
The Battle of the Somme would come to define the futility of the First World War. It went on for 6 more months at a cost of 1 million men. And at the end of it, the Allied armies had moved a grand total of 5 miles. The guns of the Somme were so loud and so insistent that they were heard across the English Channel in London, 150 miles away. In every country that was involved in the war, there were growing problems at home. After so many years of struggle, the disillusionment of the battlefront now extended to the home front. Russia, in particular, was ripe for revolution. Its people were starving, and its battered army was on the verge of defeat. In February 1917, a food riot broke out in the city of Petrograd, which had been called St. Petersburg. In no time, Russia was embroiled in full-scale revolution. The ruling family, led by Tsar Nicholas, was brought down. 300 years of royal rule were replaced by a provisional government that stubbornly decided to continue the war. The Germans chose this moment to help a Russian revolutionary return home from exile, a man who spoke for a socialist movement known to Russians as the Bolsheviks. His given name was Vladimir Ulyanov. He's better remembered as Vladimir Lenin. Sasha Bryansky served as Lenin's bodyguard.
He spoke with a lot of gestures, thrust forward, calling us to advance, saying power had been taken over by the bourgeoisie that went on with the bloody war. A new order had to be established to ensure the power of the working class.
Lenin and the Bolsheviks hoped to create the world's first communist state, where all land, capital, and political power would be given to the people. For many Russians, it would mean the end of privilege.
Victory of the Bolsheviki would mean the end of Russia. That we knew. I remember one evening at our country place, I was running down the lawn to call my mother to tell her that supper was ready. And I suddenly stopped. And there was all the beauty around. The roses, the trees, the park, the lawns. It was a beautiful place. It was sunset. And I stopped and said, all this disappears. All this will be gone. That was the one moment I remember, that feeling of fear that the whole world of which I was part was disappearing.
And it would. In October 1917, Lenin encouraged an insurrection against the provisional government that had replaced the fallen Tsar. The end came at the Tsar's old winter palace.
I ran up the carpeted stairway. In the very first room, I saw soldiers standing with their rifles ready. I shouted, "Down! Put down your weapons!" The defenders just dropped their weapons and left.
We saw the fires in the night. And then, after 5 or 6 days, the shooting died. There were no more guns. So we knew it was over. And we knew that the Bolsheviki had won.
With Lenin's victory, Russia quickly withdrew from the war. But the Germans had seen their plans succeed only to find that they now faced a new opponent. It was clear to most Americans now that Germany regarded them as an enemy too. President Woodrow Wilson resisted the demands to get involved for a while. But by 1917, the Germans had increased their attacks on unarmed ships. And then they brazenly urged Mexico to invade the United States. The president felt he had no other option.
Mr. Speaker!
On April 2nd, 1917, Woodrow Wilson stood anxiously before a special session of Congress and asked for a declaration of war. He hoped it would be the war to end all wars.
He said, "It is a fearful thing for me to try to lead a great peaceful people into war. It could be one of the most terrible and disastrous of all wars. But let me tell you this, right is more precious than peace.
The idea of a last great war.
To lead a peaceful people, let's be honest, America is very warlike. We love fighting. And if you disagree, I'll fight you on that right now. I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, we're averaging what? One war every, 25 years? I mean, that's... In my life, I don't remember how many wars we were in with Reagan, Noriega, and stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't. We didn't declare war, but we had troops there. Gulf War under Bush. Clinton had more troop deployments than any other president at that time. Like Kosovo and stuff like that. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Okay, that felt better. I think I have another one coming. I do. Okay. No more sneezes. There's another one coming. Let's see, Kosovo. And then you get into Bush Jr. and Iraq, Afghanistan. Obama kind of carried them. Yeah, I mean, we're a fighting people.
And being part of it was very, very strong appeal. And it certainly influenced me a great deal. I said, if we're never going to see another war, this is the time to see it.
In the summer of 1917, American troops landed in France, returning the favor of Lafayette, the French soldier who had fought with America during the Revolutionary War.
One of the officers, he said it loud enough for everybody to hear it. Lafayette, he was waving his hand. Lafayette, Lafayette. I didn't know who Lafayette was. Lafayette, Lafayette, we're here.
We was coming to the end of our men, and when the Americans decided to have a go, I was absolutely, I could have said hooray.
They were. Give me a second. I'm going to look up the Lafayette thing because it's very interesting. Give me just a second. Okay. So this is why I stopped it. This is something that I found out a while ago. During World War I, American troops led by General John J. Pershing visited the grave of Marquis de Lafayette in Picpus Cemetery in Paris. Colonel Charles E. Stanton, great last name, Pershing's aide, famously declared, "Lafayette, we are here," at the ceremony. What a great last name. I'd love to know if I'm related to him. I'm going to say yes, just because he did a great thing. If he had murdered, 19 people, I'd be like, no, I don't know who that guy is. We don't even share the same last name. It's spelled differently, even though it's identical.
Untouched by the anxiety and doubt that had afflicted everybody else by that stage. They were American, They were what Americans were supposed to be.
They were enthusiastic. They were also badly armed, poorly trained, and like the Europeans before them, completely unprepared for what lay ahead of them.
The train came through from the front, and we got to go aboard, of course, which we did as soon as we could get on it, and ask the guys how it was up there, what's going on, and what do you do? And it was a hospital train. I can see these poor kids, like me, youngsters, with a leg gone, or 2 arms gone.
Well, this was a kind of a cold water treatment all of a sudden to realize what war was like. You grew up very quickly in surroundings like that. It was no longer freshman studies. It was the real world.
This is a complete side note. It just dawned on me. I was looking up, I have a Pershing book. Pershing's in Iowa. His boyhood home. Now, they didn't mention him here, but I mentioned him on there. But if anyone wants me to, I will go to his home. He was a World War I general. I'll go to his home and make a video there. Tell me if you want me to.
By 1918, with thousands of Americans pouring into France every day, the Germans decided they had to do something massive.
In March 1918, the German army tried its last major gamble, last major offensive on the Western Front, and it was successful. It was a remarkable moment. The Western Front moved. The War of Movement finally arrived.
And after years of impasse, the Germans suddenly threatened to overwhelm the Allies and actually capture the French capital, Paris.
The Germans had a fire. They called it sweeping fire. Everything up on earth got hit. They either was wounded or died.
The threat to Paris was so severe that 1 million people simply left the city. The Germans got to within 30 miles. At this point, these still semi-trained American divisions were thrown into the battle, and along with the French, managed to stop the German drive.
The Germans had put everything into this last desperate effort, and when it was over, they were finally spent. Along the Western Front that autumn, the focus shifted from war to peace. On the 10th of November, the Kaiser was forced into exile by his own government, a victim of the war he had helped to start.
This struck me so deeply that I can tell you I had a little picture of the Kaiser in my room. What did I do? I put a black tie around the picture to show my utter sorrow for this tremendous change in history.
I understand why, he got expelled, booted. I think that makes sense. I don't know if they'll talk about it, but on a side note, the very first American killed and the very last American killed, I believe in World War I, are buried in the same cemetery, side by side, purely an accident. It's a military cemetery, strictly an accident. I say that, I don't think it was planned that way, but yeah, they're buried side by side. It's crazy.
And finally, at the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, November 1918, the Germans formally surrendered.
And suddenly, the guns stopped, and it was a terrible shock. It was as if somebody had hit me over the head with a big pan.
That sudden hush, after 4 years of continual gunfire, had become part of our life. There seemed to be something missing. We didn't believe it, you know.
One of the greatest calamities in human history was over, and America's veterans began to return home. The trouble was that having made the world a safer place, American veterans returned to a very uncertain future. The economy that had boomed during the war was now shrinking. Factories were laying off workers, just as veterans came looking for jobs.
We had no help to find a job, no grants to go to school, to finish our college education. When you took your discharge, that was it. You had no more connection with the government or they with you. You were on your own.
In the winter of 1918, Europe was a disaster. The empires of Germany, Austria, and Russia had been shattered, leaving destitute nations in their wake. Even the victors, Britain and France, grappled with ruin and rage. In all, 9 million men had died. Every family had lost someone: a father, a son, a brother, a cousin, a friend. For years, the wounded and the maimed haunted the streets of every city in Europe. And even those who had escaped physical harm were forever changed by the Great War.
Sometimes I'm thinking about the war 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. My brother being hit, my best friend being killed. I wonder while I'm lying in bed, how is it that I'm lying here and they're all dead?
Yeah, that's that survivor's remorse, and you just, as easy it is for me to say, you just can't think like that. Because I would, in that same situation, I'm sure I would think, I think every rational person, thinks that way, but you can't. You got to consider yourself lucky. And because that's what it is. War's just, it's a game of inches. You could all come out of that trench and start running, and you could turn your head, your whole body like this, because you're running and you look back, and just as you look back, the person who's running behind you gets shot. And when you're standing like this, you would have been shot maybe right here in the face. But because you turned, that person gets hit. It's just, all they're doing is just putting bullets out there and hoping they hit targets. They don't care who they're hitting. They just want to hit them. And as sad as it is, survivor's remorse is just, it's just a terrible thing that we deal with. Why am I here? Everyone I know died, and it's like, you just can't think like that.
Well, I lost all my youth. I lost the best years of my life, you might say. And I lost so many friends. It was all lost for me. I mean, a few medals don't make up for that, Nobody wins in a war. They lost. We didn't win.
Governments win in a war, but the people who have to fight them, they never win. Whether your side won or your side lost, you suffer the same consequences, the same shell shock, the same scene of losing friends, losing relatives. You suffer. The soldier suffers. The governments don't. Unfortunately, there's more people for them to send in.
Into this chaos, traveling to a post-war peace conference in the French town of Versailles, came President Woodrow Wilson. With him, President Wilson brought his so-called 14 points, which called for liberty and self-determination for all, even the enemy. The people of Britain and France greeted Wilson ecstatically, for he represented the hope of democracy. But the British and French governments were interested in revenge.
The Versailles Peace Treaty is the politics of hatred. It was the encapsulation of every mean-spirited element on the Allied side.
The new Soviet Union was completely excluded from the peace conference, and not one victorious power was ready to give up a colony. Sowing the seeds of future discord, Britain and France added several colonies by carving up the Middle East. As for the Germans, they were forced to accept conditions that would humiliate and impoverish them for years.
The one thing that Wilson was trying to do was to get them to stop. He didn't want to punish the Germans. But a lot of the allies nearby, they wanted to punish him. And, you're in the Western Hemisphere. You're completely out of this. You don't really have a say. And it's a great what if. What if they weren't punished as much? Who knows? But at the same time, not trying to make Wilson seem all that innocent, the book that I read on Wilson, one of the reasons why he wanted America in the war, outside the sub attacks and stuff like that, submarine attacks, was because the war would potentially end and America wouldn't have a say in that half of the world. And this is a great opportunity when the war looks like it's starting to wind down a little bit. America can get involved. We can help wind it down. Yes, that we did want to end the war. But when it came to having a say, he wanted America to have a say in Europe. And it wasn't just him. It was Congress and stuff like that. And that was in the book that I read called Wilson by A. Scott Berg, B-E-R-G. Yeah. Give me just a second. I'll grab it. All right. It was just out of reach behind there, but I mean, you really can't see it too well. But Wilson, A. Scott Berg. It's a really fantastic book. It's 700, let's see, what is it? 743 pages. But yeah, there's a great spot in here. I wish I could remember it. He got along with a general that was from Africa. Wow. I turned right to this page. Treaty of Versailles contained 440 articles divided into 15 sections. The first was the League Covenant. This isn't about Woodrow Wilson, by the way, but the second and third sections redrew Germany's borders and much of the rest of Europe's. Germany would cede 5,600 square miles of Alsace, Lorraine, to France, 382 square miles to Luxembourg and Holland, almost 22,000 square miles, including West Prussia, to Poland. Danzig would become a free city, air quotes, internationalized zone under the guarantee of the League of Nations. I'm going to keep reading this because it's just a little paragraph. League of Nations. And a separate East Prussia would hold a plebiscite to determine its nationality. Furthermore, Germany was to recognize the total independence of German, Austria, and Czechoslovakia, and to respect the independence of all territories that had been part of the former Russia Empire. Section 4 itemized the German renunciation of all her overseas possessions from Liberia, Morocco, and Egypt to Sam and Shantung, including whatever claims she had in Turkey and Bulgaria. But there was a I wish I could find him. There was a he was a general from South Africa. And man, he was sharp. He was on, come on, stop. He was on board with Wilson and not punishing them, Germany, so hard, because he said, we're just going to be at war again. And he didn't want Europe in the Middle East like it was, and he wanted kind of everyone to go back to the kind of the way it was. And I wish I could remember that guy's name. He was big in that book near the end when everything is happening, and he did a fantastic job. This isn't about him though, sorry.
In the end, Versailles was about punishment, not peacemaking.
In many ways, all those men who died, 9 million men, died for nothing.
Almost before it was over then, it was clear that the legacy of this war would be anything but the end of all wars. Within 30 years, these same nations would all fight again over precisely the same ground. The war had shown technology's dark side, but dark or bright, technology was here to stay. And in the decade that followed, an electric pulse of change ran through America. We'll see that on the next episode of The Century, America's Time. Thank you for joining us. I'm Peter Jennings.
Oh, Peter Jennings, stop playing these games and just tell us what happens next. Oh, I can cheat. America's Time, 1920 to 29, boom to bust. Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. My grandpa Stanton, my dad's dad, was born in 1920. It's kind of funny. All right. Colonel Charles E. Stanton. Oh, here he is. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this mug. I'm in Illinois. I've been near Monticello. Yeah, I'm related to him. Just pass that along if you would. Just in random conversations with people that you know. What are you going to do tomorrow? I have no idea, but that guy Kris Stanton on YouTube, yeah, he's related to that Charles E. Stanton. People be like, cool. I don't know who either of those are. It's not important. You don't need to know. But what you need to know is that he says that we're supposed to pass that along. Anyways, it's not about him. It's back to Peter Jennings. All right, well, we're going to end this here. Okay, we're going to end this here. Hope you enjoyed. We will, I'll keep covering these ones. It's been a while. Completely forgot. Been a while. All right, until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.